Clara held her position high above the cloud layer, the thin air vibrating against her skin. Below, the landscape waited for the season's first frost. She aligned her hands, focused on the crisp, biting cold that usually signaled the shift, and flicked her wrist to release the storm. The air did not turn cold. It turned thick. Instead of the sharp bite of winter,
a heavy, cloying scent of peppermint flooded her senses. She gasped.
But the sky had already betrayed her. Thousands of red and white candy canes erupted from the clouds,
plummeting toward the earth like iron rods. They struck the rooftops below with a deafening, metallic clatter that echoed across the valley. Clara dove,
banking hard to avoid a massive stick that hissed past her ear. The sky, usually silent and soft, was now a barrage of hard, sugary debris. She hovered in the center of the madness, watching as the streets below were buried under a relentless, clattering rain of sweets. The town was no longer waiting for winter. It was being crushed by a sudden, impossible confectionery storm. The initial excitement on the ground vanished within seconds.
Children who had darted out to gather the treats now found their boots anchored to the pavement. The candy canes were melting against the warm asphalt,
transforming the streets into a deep, amber-colored pool of syrup.
It was thick, pulling at ankles and knees, turning every step into a desperate struggle.
Clara banked left, her wings beating hard against the humid air, and saw a squirrel dart toward an oak tree. It reached the bark, pushed its paws against the wood, and stopped. The paws did not move.
It pulled, but the syrup had dried into a rigid, glue-like bond. The creature chattered in panic,
unable to break free. Below, the town square had become a silent, gummy nightmare. People were locked in place, their movements slowed to a crawl by the thickening sludge.
Clara hovered, her wings shivering as she looked down at the mess she had created. The air felt heavy and stagnant,
no longer crisp, but dense with the smell of scorched sugar.
She had intended to bring a light dusting of snow, but she had delivered a sticky, suffocating prison instead. Clara pushed her wings to their limit, slicing upward through the humid, sugar-dusted air. She burst into the ice palace, the sudden drop in temperature stinging her skin. Mr. Snowbloom stood by his massive, iron-bound cauldron. He did not look up. He stirred the contents with a slow, rhythmic motion that ignored the chaos radiating from the city below. Clara landed hard on his desk, her chest heaving, sending a cloud of frost into the air. She pointed a trembling finger toward the wide window where the candy storm continued to pummel the rooftops.
She spoke, her voice thin and desperate, asking him to intervene.
Mr. Snowbloom stepped away from the cauldron. He walked to the glass and watched a large gumdrop bounce off a statue in the square. He turned back, his expression locked into a hard, unyielding line. He held his staff out toward her, but the wood remained motionless. He did not speak, but the message was clear. He gestured to the sky, then pointed directly at her. He made it plain that the magic was hers alone to command and hers alone to correct. Clara stood on the desk, the reality of his refusal settling into her bones. She was the one who had opened the sky, and he would not lift a finger to close it. Clara dove back into the center of the storm, the air thick and cloying. She raised her wand,
eyes locked on the trapped town, and chanted the reversal. Instead of cold, a spray of pink bubbles erupted from the tip.
They hit the syrup and popped instantly, hardening into sticky, translucent globs that only deepened the mess. She landed on a nearby cloud, her wings heavy, coated in the syrupy residue. She tried to lift her wings, but the weight dragged her down. She looked at her wand, then let it slide from her fingers. It clattered against the cloud. She stood tall, planted her feet into the mist,
and looked directly into the swirling wind. She shouted that she had caused the disaster.
The words left her lungs, sharp and clear. As the sound faded, the temperature plummeted. The air snapped with the sudden arrival of true winter. A blue light flared at the tip of her fallen wand,
pulsing with raw energy. She snatched it from the cloud and swung it in a wide, sweeping arc.
A massive wave of white, powdery snow rolled over the city, crashing down like a tidal wave. It buried the candy, the sticky residue, and the traps under a thick, clean blanket of fresh powder. The streets of the town emerged from the white tide, scrubbed clean and silent. The sticky traps had vanished, replaced by a pristine, undisturbed layer of powder. From the windows of the houses,
People stepped out, looking up at the sky with wide eyes, cheering as the air grew crisp again. Mr.
Snowbloom appeared on a sudden gust of wind, his presence quiet and brief. He reached out and tapped her shoulder, a singular nod of acknowledgement that the balance was restored. Clara felt her wings catch the updraft, their surface clear and light once more. She turned away from the town, her gaze fixed on the endless stretch of the winter sky. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a single, red and white candy cane, tucking it into her belt. It was not a trophy of her mistake, but a weight of reality to carry forward. She beat her wings, gaining altitude with every stroke. The ice beneath her shimmered as she accelerated, leaving the village far behind. She flew into the expanse, a steady, rhythmic motion that carried her toward the next horizon, her path no longer guided by impulse, but by the quiet confidence of one who had finally learned the true weight of her own power.